Welcome back to the Green Means Go channel. It's your host, me. Today, we are going to be reviewing the #1 rated documentary on Netflix, and that is Johnny Football, the story of Johnny Manziel. Obviously, there's going to be some spoilers in this video. I'm going to assume you've already seen it. If you haven't, come back after you watched it, or if you're not going to watch it, stick around. I'll just tell you about it. I've gone back and forth about how I'm going to talk about this. There's so much I want to cover. I watched it twice. The first time, just enjoyed it. Second time, I also enjoyed it, but I took some notes. So I have a running list of thoughts. I may pull those up, and we just may walk through those step by step. Outside of that, before we get into the notes, I will say I think this documentary was well done. I would give it a 9 out of 10. I think there could have been more time spent covering his life now or his journey post Browns rather than his lead up. I do see value in the lead up, but nonetheless, I am curious more about now than I was about earlier. So besides that, I can't have too many criticisms of the documentary. Let's go ahead and look at my notes, talk about what I think of the documentary, and share some opinions not only of the documentary itself, but of Johnny Manziel. So before we get into absolutely any of the documentary, Johnny Manziel comes on the screen and says that he lives with regret, which I think is a huge piece of the puzzle considering a lot of people tend to hate this guy. They think he's arrogant. They think he blew his opportunities. They don't wish him well. And I think it's important and shows the growth of Manziel that he is able to open up this documentary and say, look, guys, I screwed up and I accept that and I acknowledge it and I am held accountable for it. So that I think was a good opening of the video to get people in the right frame of reference and hopefully have a little bit of sympathy for Manziel, which, again, some people may say he doesn't deserve sympathy. I walked away from this feeling sympathetic for him in some ways not, which we'll talk about. So he makes a distinction in the very beginning about himself as a player versus himself as a human, which I think comes into play quite a lot, that he just felt like that was kind of two different people in his life, which I think probably a lot of professional athletes feel like. And I know when I watch professional athletes, sometimes I look at them more as a player and a thing, right, than I do as an actual person. So I do think that's important to keep in mind as well. More or less, the video begins with him in high school, and I just think he was kind of overworked in some ways. I know it's Texas and they take their ball seriously, but I have to wonder if he goes to a place that isn't so intense in high school. There's two paths. Maybe he ends up, a little bit fresher when it comes to all this other stress that he ends up encountering, but also maybe he doesn't get that chance because he's not the player that he is. So, whatever that may be, I don't know. I just thought it was interesting that I was a swimmer and we practiced twice, morning and night, and it wore me out so much that I wasn't even passionate about swimming anymore and ended up quitting. So I just found a lot of similarities between what Manziel experienced in that overworked pressure situation and what I experienced. So I related to him a little bit there. The head coach, Kevin Sumlin, and Cliff Kingsbury, the offensive coordinator, join, I believe, the year before Manziel gets there. And if I had to pick a bone with any person in this video and say, if I had to put blame on somebody, sure, Manziel makes a lot of choices, but Cliff Kingsbury rubbed me the wrong way in this documentary. It is almost like he's proud of the way he let Manziel get away with things. Multiple times in the documentary, he talks about, I knew Manziel was hungover. I knew Manziel was partying. I knew Manziel was making these decisions. And I was just like, play ball, brother. Like, it just gives this bizarre arrogance after the fact. In that moment, it's one thing to be like, this guy's making our team a lot of money. He's paying for my job. He's going to allow me opportunities to go coach at Texas Tech and then eventually the Cardinals. I don't think Cliff Kingsbury would coach in Arizona without Johnny Manziel. So Johnny Manziel is a huge piece of Cliff Kingsbury's puzzle, and all Cliff Kingsbury can do is be like, yeah, bro, dude's awesome. I just let him kind of do what he wanted, and he was awesome. It just was weird. So if I have to place blame, it would be on Cliff Kingsbury. I know that may not be a popular opinion, but it's kind of what I took from the documentary. Also interesting, Kevin Sumlin was not in the video. They showed interviews and things, but I'm going to assume they reached out to him. He denied for reasons I'm not sure, but it was an interesting thing to me. And, Cliff Kingsbury was quoted saying this: that's the guy no matter what, even when Manziel was getting into trouble. Another thing before their Mississippi State game, pictures surface of Manziel out partying, and Cliff has his assistant go over to talk to Johnny Manziel, about the choices. Cliff doesn't approach him, right? Cliff doesn't discipline him. He sends his assistant over, which I don't know the dynamics of the practice. Maybe Cliff had other things to worry about, but it just feels odd that the assistant's the one doling out the discipline in that instance. I think this was an important thing to note, that before the Alabama game, they go to Tuscaloosa, no expectations whatsoever. And this was kind of Johnny Manziel's big break. And he says he played with the attitude that this doesn't matter. He was playing free. He was playing loose. And he says, when I play that way, I play better. And I can't help but think that Alabama game was really the last game that Manziel ever had in that total mindset, which had he been able, I caught myself wondering, what if they lose that game? What if they lose that game? He still has a successful year, but he doesn't become Johnny Football. Do we see something different? And again, there's no way to know. And a lot of people are going to say he's Johnny Manziel. He's going to make these choices. Probably not. But between that and between winning the Heisman his freshman year, which had never been done ever in the history of college football, so much pressure. After he brings all of this attention to the football team and to Texas A&M, obviously their program grows. The biggest statistic I want to point out, because of how insane it is Texas A&M got $740 million in donations the year after Manziel's freshman year. $300 million was the highest donation total that any university had ever received in history. They doubled it. That's unbelievable, okay? And so put yourself in Manziel's shoes. And he says, I had a deep hatred against the NCAA. Put yourself in his shoes. Everybody's making money. Everyone's making millions of dollars, and he is getting zero of it. So what does he do? Obviously, if you've watched the documentary, he signs a bunch of stuff. The NCAA finds out, and they suspend him for a game. I can't blame him. I think it's, in my opinion, the NCAA has that law in place so that players can't make money without them getting a cut, right? And now we've changed the law so players can get name, image, likeness, money. And Johnny Manziel would have made an absolute killing if he had that. He still made a lot of money by himself in this, but I think he was put in a situation where he couldn't win, and I cannot blame him for signing autographs, for getting money, for celebrating, doing what he does when he looks around and he sees everybody else benefiting from what he is doing and he's getting nothing. So I don't place any blame on him for that. I guess he agreed to a contract. He should have known better. He should have thought about his future. Yeah, we can say all those things, but ultimately he's 19 years old. He's in this situation for the first time. I don't hold that against him. He then talks about the media and how much pressure he felt and how his life was he was just in this fish tank for everyone to watch. I can't imagine what that's like. I have nothing to say about that because I don't know what that feels like. It can't be great. A lot of people are mad that his dad blamed the coaches. I think blame goes both ways. So, whatever. And again, coming back to Cliff Kingsbury, he has a quote in the documentary that says, as long as he wasn't getting caught, do it, meaning partying, because he needed to have that off the field release to play good on the field. Again, it's just Cliff Kingsbury acknowledging that he knew what was happening and not caring. So to me, that just says if you discipline this kid, who makes you a ton of money, you start to lose the money. So let's just not discipline him. My favorite person probably in the documentary is his agent. I just think his agent is really raw and uncut, and he's kind of like, dude, like I messed this all up. There's nothing I could have done. I tried my best, and he did. Again, if you haven't seen the video, you got to watch it, just if not for his stories, the agent stories. I think they're really good. I mean, up to, Manziel was good a week before the combine, then he partied and he faked an illness his family was going to fake an illness so that he didn't have to go to the combine and do all these interviews. They didn't end up doing that, but he does admit that because they didn't do that and he goes to the combine and he passes these drug tests and he looks good and he crushes the interviews, he admits that it made him let loose. It was just, and he says that. He says, I got away with it, so I didn't care. Okay, and that's just such an important piece of a puzzle, and it's multiple pieces, that he did this his whole life. This was probably the craziest part to me, the fact that before his pro day with the Browns, who drafted him, He gets drunk with his receivers. The receivers don't show up to the pro day, and he has to throw routes to his agent and his lawyer while the Browns watch. And the Browns don't go, this is weird. Manziel didn't bring any receivers to catch the ball. He has his agent out here. Maybe we should just not draft the guy. Maybe that's a sign. Nope. Let's take him in the first round. I thought it was sad that when he talks about the Browns, when he talks about being drafted, he uses this word. He says they were excited. He doesn't say any time that he was excited. And he says it was the opposite. He said he felt empty even before his first game in the NFL, and that the NFL was not fun. And that's where I was like, how much do I blame this guy? Okay. And this is where it really resonated with me, because I have had things in my life, okay, swimming and teaching, where I did not personally enjoy it. And I felt like everyone around me wanted me to enjoy it. Or they said, you're good at this. You should do this because you're good at it. And when you personally don't feel like it is valuable to you, it's not fun to you, it's not rewarding to you, and you're just doing it out of the expectation for others, it's incredibly dangerous, it's incredibly stressful, it's incredibly exhausting. And I think that's where Manziel found himself. Now, what did I do? I walked away. Okay? What did Johnny Manziel do? He self-sabotaged. He didn't want to just walk away, and so he admits, right? He admits that he made choices on purpose so that he could get kicked off the team, so he could get cut. He was self-sabotaging, and that is sad to me, right? This was also sad, right? He goes to rehab, and he says the first days there, Jeremy Fowler, ESPN reporter, shows up, right? They found out where his rehab was. He pulls by on a call. It's just like, dude, like, we want so badly for these athletes to better themselves. We always talk about that, get the help you need, and then they do, and what do? We follow them around to try to get the next story. It's so inhumane. And, that kind of frustrated me a little bit. Another one of the wildest things was that a Saturday afternoon before a NFL game with the Browns, he flew to Las Vegas with a wig and a mustache on, trying to blend in. And before Sunday's game, he was going to fly back. He missed his flight, and he said he just went on a bender. Okay, he just lost all control. And this was also interesting. When he got cut from the Browns, he said it was the biggest weight lifted off his shoulders, which is so sad, dude. Just walk away. But then you can't get it. I know it's so complex, and I know it's so easy to say walk away, but you don't want to quit. You have this contract, you have this money. It's just, it's tough. Okay. Another sad part, everybody cut him off, right? His dad, his agent, he said that's when it got the worst. Full-blown drug use, oxy, coke, right? Nobody was there to support him. He said, I felt like I had nobody. Like, that's crazy. And the fact that when he was diagnosed bipolar, he said he felt like it was a label of alcoholic or drug addict, on par with that. Like, nobody in his life had been like, dude, you're not okay, and that's fine. Let's get you the help, right? It's not your fault. These aren't choices that you made to feel like this. We need to help you get the support. He's like, I'm an alcoholic. It's like bipolar. He's choosing to do this, and I got this stigma. I don't know. That crushed me when I heard it. Not to mention, okay, the talks about him buying a gun and going to take his own life. And he said, and like, this is where I can't be critical of him. This is where when I see comments, I'm like, dude, did you watch that? Like, hearing him say, I wanted to look like the worst human alive, so suicide made sense and no one would question it. Like, it's so hard for me to be critical of him when he's admitting, look, I know what I was doing, and I was in such a place where it made the most sense to me to live an awful life so nobody would think it's crazy that I took myself out of the world. That's bizarre. I mean, that's sad. Okay, he felt like he had no one to turn to in that moment. Now, he tried to take his life. The gun didn't go. It just, like, I don't know. It was hard for me to be like, yeah, Johnny Manziel's an arrogant prick. Like, I just couldn't do that in that moment. I think it's important to mention he doesn't blame Texas A&M. Okay, he admits he wasn't an NFL quarterback. He admits he was a frat boy. He enjoyed the freedom on the field, the freedom off of field, and he even admits, was enough ever enough? When are you going to stop? Like, he had those thoughts, and he never did anything with them. So that's all of my notes, and I would just say that ultimately, I give this a 9 out of 10. I think it was a great documentary. I feel for Manziel. I don't judge him a bit, and I hope he's doing well. And what I learned from this is You never know what these athletes, what these people, what anybody's going through. And if we are more, quick to step back and say, how can we help somebody? How can we hear them out rather than abandoning them, making comments on the internet, it could be better off. So that's what I got from it. It's a great documentary. They tell a good story, so I would recommend it highly. Thanks for coming by the channel as always. I appreciate your guys' support. Drop a comment if you have something to mention about the video. I'd love to talk about it. Other than that, I will see you guys on our next video. Take care and be kind, shall we?